Welcome to this explainer. Okay, so if you're just stepping into a foundational Mandarin pathway, like a grade 7 Chinese course, you might think your only job today is just learning how to say hello, right? But what if I told you that in Chinese, a simple hello actually contains this complex web of respect, hierarchy, and centuries of tradition? Today, we're decoding Mandarin. We're not just memorizing vocabulary here. We're unlocking culture, identity, and real, authentic communication. By the time we're done, you're going to look at every single syllable you speak in a totally different light.
Here's our roadmap for today. We're going to look at culture and language connections, check out the HSK levels of proficiency, visualize everyday communication, do a worked analysis of language choices, run through a tone misconception check, and wrap up with an exit question on cultural connections. Let's get right into it.
Section 1. Culture and language connections. Let's see how this builds our absolute foundation for interpreting Chinese.
When you start learning a new language, you might naturally assume it's 100% about communication, like just swapping English words for Chinese words, right? Well, not exactly. The ACTFL 5Cs framework shows us that communication is just one piece of a much larger puzzle. You literally cannot truly communicate in Mandarin without understanding the culture shaping those words, drawing comparisons to English, and building connections to entirely new communities. All 5 of these Cs are completely intertwined. If you isolate the vocabulary from the culture, you aren't really speaking Chinese, you're just making sounds. You need the whole ecosystem.
So, that brings us to the massive essential question for this unit. How does language learning connect culture, identity, and community? I really want you to start thinking of yourself as a cultural detective. When you learn to address an elder in Mandarin, you're trying on a brand new lens of respect that might be super different from your everyday English identity. You aren't just some memorization machine programmed to spit out data, you're an active participant in an ancient living culture. When you speak, you're projecting a whole new aspect of your identity.
Moving on to Section 2, the HSK levels of proficiency. This is the framework we use to actually measure our progress as cultural detectives.
What's really fascinating about this progression is how it maps your entire journey. The HSK, or Hanyu Shuiping Kaoshi, is the absolute gold standard for Mandarin proficiency if you're a non-native speaker. Think of it like a beautiful, structured ladder. You don't just jump straight into debating philosophy or writing complex essays. No way. You start at level 1, which is focused entirely on simple, everyday survival exchanges, life scenes. By level 3, those exchanges become effective enough for basic work and study. And eventually, years down the line, you climb all the way to level 9, where your language is precise, deep, and nuanced enough for high-level academic research. It's a marathon, not a sprint.
But hey, for right now, as we kick off Unit 1, the pressure is entirely off all that heavy academic stuff. Our target is firmly on level 1, simple exchanges in everyday life scenes. Ask yourself, can you introduce yourself? Can you navigate a really basic classroom interaction? Do you know how to greet the person sitting next to you? If you can do those things accurately, you're perfectly on track. We're just building the base of the pyramid right now.
Section 3, context visual for everyday communication. Let's ground this theory in a concrete, real-world case study. Think about this. When you walk into a classroom, how you say hello is actually your first real intercultural test. You don't just use one universal greeting for everyone in the room. If you're talking to a classmate or a peer, you might use the standard ni hao. But if you turn to address your teacher, you need to shift to nin hao. That subtle shift in just the first word isn't just a different vocabulary term to memorize. It's a vital cultural tool. It's used to establish your identity as a student and show elevated respect to an elder or superior. Every single classroom greeting is an exercise in intercultural communication.
Now, you probably heard me emphasize the sounds there, which brings us to pinyin and tones. Before we analyze any more dialogue, we've got to lock this down. Pinyin is the romanization system, basically the familiar English letters used to spell out how the Chinese characters sound. But here is the major catch. Mandarin is a tonal language. There are 4 main pitch variations: a flat tone, a rising tone, a dipping tone, and a falling tone. In English, pitch just changes your mood, right? But in Mandarin, changing your pitch changes the entire dictionary definition of the word. Mastering this is absolutely non-negotiable.
All right, Section 4. Worked analysis of language choices. Let's model exactly how to pull apart these choices in real time.
Let's put those detective hats on and analyze a real language choice. Imagine you need to introduce yourself to your new teacher. First, you identify your audience. It's a figure of authority, right? Therefore, your language choice has to shift. You reject the casual ni hao and intentionally select the respectful nin ao. Next, you absolutely must recognize the exact tones required. Nin uses a rising tone, and hao uses a dipping tone. Finally, you execute the phrase to introduce yourself. It's like a rapid-fire, highly structured checklist your brain runs through to ensure HSK Level 1 success. You're analyzing, selecting, and executing.
And you know what? This analytical process directly maps back to our ACTFL standard of comparisons. Step 1, you compare the sounds. You realize English doesn't really have a standalone word quite like nin that automatically codes for elevated respect. Step 2, you analyze the impact. You know that if you use the wrong tone on hao, you might not be understood at all. Step 3, you connect it to identity. By intentionally choosing nin hao, you're signaling to your teacher that you understand and respect Chinese cultural hierarchies. Your language choice was deliberate, culturally aware, and totally intentional. No accidents here.
Moving to Section 5, Misconception Check on Tone Trouble. What happens when things actually go wrong?
This is the ultimate trap for native English speakers, and honestly, it's the essential question of our first unit. How do pronunciation and tone change meaning in Mandarin compared to English? When we speak English, we use tone to show emotion. If I raise my pitch at the end of a sentence, I'm asking a question. If I say it flatly, I'm just bored. But if you bring those English habits into a Mandarin classroom, you don't just change the emotion. You literally accidentally rewrite the dictionary.
Let's look at the ultimate example of this. In Mandarin, the syllable ma can mean wildly different things depending entirely on the tone. If you use a high, flat tone, ma, you are saying mother. But if you use a dipping tone, ma, you are saying horse. Imagine trying to warmly greet someone's mother and accidentally calling her a horse just because you are feeling a little lazy and dropped your pitch. Ignoring tones doesn't just make you sound unenthusiastic, it breaks the communication entirely. It can turn a simple introduction into a very confusing or severely embarrassing exchange.
So, the crucial takeaway here is this. Moving up the HSK ladder to level 3 requires an effective exchange, or 有效交流. You absolutely cannot have an effective exchange if your listener is constantly trying to guess if you meant to say mother or horse. Wrong tones completely prevent effectiveness. That's exactly why this curriculum forces us to focus so heavily on tones right now at level 1. By mastering these pitches today, you are pouring a solid, concrete foundation for the entire rest of your language journey.
And finally, Section 6, Exit Question on Cultural Connections. We've seen how theory connects to practice, so now it's your turn. I want you to take this challenge into your next class. How will your specific tone and vocabulary choices, using the 5 C's, build a bridge of respect to the Chinese-speaking community? The next time you open your mouth to say hello, remember that you aren't just reciting a textbook or checking off a rote memory task. You are actively participating in a rich intercultural exchange. You're navigating centuries of culture, hierarchy, and identity in a single breath. So get out there, be a language detective, and make every syllable count. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep exploring.